Hey everybody, tonight we're debating whether or not pot should be legal, and we are starting right now. With Cider and Port's opening statement, thanks so much for being with us, Cider and Port. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for having me, James. I would be remiss, I know it is very off topic right off the bat, but I would be remiss if I did not start my opening statement with my utmost call of support to the people of Ukraine at this moment in time. With that being said, that other politics stuff out of the way, I have changed some of my positions policy-wise over the years. You might have to go back a little while, but you'll find statements from me arguing for trickle-down economics. I was very wrong in the past, and I'd be very wrong again. This, however, is just not one of those things that I've ever changed my mind on. I've always been in favor of weed being legal. That was just like a gut reaction, but then kind of looking into it, you kind of find that, well, weed has been known to help fight cancer cells. Weed helps with pain. It helps with anxiety or stress. It's been shown to help with Parkinson's. It's been shown to help with seizures. It's been known to help with ADHD, BPD, and some other disorders. It would bring significant opportunities in an employment and an economic sense. And we would get to help people get off harder drugs as well. If you look at the, Portugal model, and I think it's the Swedish model, although I might be wrong on that, they've had huge results when they kind of legalize the kind of softer drugs, that it helps them get off harder ones. It doesn't give you things like liver failure or like the various cancers, etc. It's kind of weird to me that people have no issue with something like alcohol or cigarettes being completely legal, when we know that these things can give you various cancers from lung, throat, etc. And we know that alcohol causes, liver failure, and you can possibly die from it. Yet no one ever really talks about the fact that nobody has ever overdosed from weed. Nobody has ever kind of gotten liver failure or cancer or anything else like that from weed. And yet that's the thing that's illegal. It's just kind of strange to me. Those are more than enough reasons to be in favor of the legalization of weed. And that's not just because I'm a stoner, but it's because I'm in favor of the most freedom possible without negatively affecting others. Because I am a stoner, for years, I have absolutely hated the argument that weed is a gateway drug to stronger drugs. The only thing weed is a gateway drug to is happiness, the munchies, cartoons, enjoying the company of the elderly, aquariums, and the realization that we live in a simulation. Thanks again, James, for having me. That is the end of my opening.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening statement. And we're going to kick it over to Carissa for her opening statement as well. I want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you were from. And with that, Carissa, thanks so much. The floor is all yours for your opening as well.
Thank you so much, James. I am so excited about this conversation, and I am very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So I have something that I prepared that I'll read. Marijuana is commonly thought of as a harmless drug, difficult to get addicted to, impossible to die from, and unlikely to produce aggressive behavior in the user. As of 2021, 49% of the American adult population has tried marijuana. There are rarely any news articles regarding it, with an exception of a far-right pundit raging out at states individually legalizing it, which is in stark contrast to the plethora of negative anecdotes and studies surrounding really any other drug close to weed's popularity. Many stoners are ready to hit you with too good to be true facts about weed, anywhere from its many benefits for mental health, its lack of harm to your lungs. I've even heard some people say that it improves your lung function, to even saying that it reduces one's risk of catching COVID. On the other side of things, we have the federal government, which categorizes marijuana as a Schedule I drug, accompanied by the likes of heroin and bath salts, greatly limiting the ability for controlled medical studies and any in-depth understanding of the risks of marijuana usage. And I quote, in a recent review of research, the Department of Health and Human Services found that scientists do not understand marijuana's chemistry and haven't conducted adequate safety and efficacy studies. End quote. Many medical researchers have been pushing the DEA to reschedule marijuana as a Schedule II drug for this reason, which would allow for the possibility of medicinal purpose, along with the understanding of how the drug interacts with the human bodily systems through controlled studies. Meth, cocaine, and fentanyl are all categorized as Schedule II drugs, which, while similarly addictive, are recognized to have potential medical use and are able to be thoroughly researched. So here we have the pillars of our bimodal distribution of polarization. The laymen who are quick to die on the green hill of cannabis, and the feds who are willing to lock up anyone who does so, regardless of their death. So who is right? Reality, as it often does, falls somewhere in the middle. As I have come to observe with many topics, those who you find at the extremes of most topics tend to be the ones that are least educated on said topic. I believe that we should listen to the experts in the field in rescheduling marijuana for research purposes. I also believe that we should decriminalize marijuana along with all other currently criminalized drugs without making them legal. This is the approach Portugal took to ameliorate their drug abuse problem, and it has worked incredibly well. While I'm open to marijuana being made legal in the future, similar to cigarettes, alcohol, or other addictive substances with potentially worse side effects, I believe that in order for this to be done ethically, we must allow people to give informed consent. As I quoted earlier, the Department of Health and Human Services readily admit that they have not conducted enough studies on marijuana to adequately understand its safety risks. We know the risks of alcohol, of nicotine, and of other drugs people frequently use, and those risks are very transparent. That is not the case with weed. I understand that on a day-to-day level, we do not see direct harm that we can link back to weed as we do with other drugs mentioned. The limited research we do have, however, suggests that the negative effects of marijuana abuse can be much more pernicious, such as gradual yet substantial cognitive decline or poorer mental health. On top of this, many of the stereotypes surrounding weed create a false sense of security surrounding addiction, which is physical and comes with a lengthy period of painful withdrawal. With approximately 10% of those who try weed developing dependence, weed is slightly less addictive than alcohol, which comes in about 15% of those who try it, explaining why weed is the second most abused drug in America. In closing, while I believe marijuana needs to be rescheduled to allow for further research into the potential positive and negative effects, I do not believe that the drug should be legalized until this has been done. People deserve to know potential harms associated with marijuana, and if the experts are saying that they cannot give an adequate explanation of those harms, we should trust them. Legalization should potentially be in the future, but now is not the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carissa, for that opening statement. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here, we have many more juicy debates coming up in the future. Want to let you know, for example, about this one at the bottom right of your screen. Two doctors collide on whether or not there is evidence for God from cosmology. You don't want to miss it, as well as other juicy debates coming up. So hit that subscribe button. And with that, thanks so much, Carissa and Cider and Port. The floor is all yours for open discussion.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I took down a few things there. Your like very, very, very opening points. I mean, like they were just true. Improving your lung capacity or your breathing ability. Yeah, no, that's just flat wrong. I mean, you are still, you know what I mean? You're still taking in smoke into your lungs. That's going to damage it in some way. Like, so it doesn't matter if it's like better than cigarettes, I guess, but it's still damaging it because you're still putting smoke in your lungs. But I guess it's just kind of like, I'm so in favor of weed being legalized because from my point of view, there just isn't enough reasons to arrive at the conclusion that it should be illegal. Like there's not enough reason to justifying it not being legal. That's from my standpoint anyway.
So I understand what you're saying. Does it concern you that like 10% of those who use weed or have ever tried it do become addicted? Is that something that's concerning to you?
I mean, it's as equally as concerning as people who get addicted to alcohol, or people who get addicted to gambling, or people who get addicted to sex. Like yes, they're like addiction is like it's sort of like everything in moderation. I kind of guess, like, you know, a little bit of drinking is okay. Too much drinking is bad. A little bit of gambling is fun. Too much gambling is a problem. It's kind of like, if you have some amount of kind of self-control over it, or that's kind of like, I'm not dismissing the people who do get addicted, but it's just, that's, I kind of see them as like a separate but related point, you know?
Right. So I understand what you're saying, and I see what you're saying. The fact that the concerns surrounding marijuana are more pernicious, such as cognitive decline, and also combined with the fact that when those are happening, the user tends to not actually even realize that that's the case. Do you think that that's something to like consider, especially considering all of the misinformation surrounding weed, such as the fact, like, so many people say you can't get physically addicted to weed, but that's just like untrue.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a low percentage, as I think you kind of agreed with, but it like, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of thinking like, okay, so you had said that now wasn't the time, that it might be some point in the future, but I mean, like, when is that time then, I guess? Because like, is it at a point where we've kind of genetically kind of like cut out addiction? Like, when is the time to make it legal?
So I completely agree with you that anything that has any property of like doing something to your brain can be addictive. And so you can't just be like, oh, anything that's addicted needs to be, you know, made illegal. I understand that. I would say the point of making it legal would be if we are able to understand like the chemical makeup of weed, which is something that I was surprised that they haven't done yet, how it affects your systems. Doing further research into it, I would say would be really important to be able to have a reasonable like risk assessment and being like, okay, so let's actually nail down what are the risks here, have controlled studies, which has been done pretty much on all of the other common drugs, alcohol, all of these other drugs have had controlled studies that are able to prove causation. That's not as much the case with weed, just because we cannot, we can't do those controlled studies, and we can't prove causation with just observational studies. So my position is that I'm not against long-term the legalization of weed, provided that we understand the risks to a good extent, and we can tell those people risks. Like, for example, if you go, I don't know if it's the way in Ireland, but if you go to like the drugstore and pick up cigarettes, you're going to have warning labels all over them. Similarly with like prescribed drugs, you're going to have like a whole sheet that they'll give you that says this could do A, B, and C, and beware of this, this, and this. And if this is happening to you, then you need to call so-and-so. That's what I would be looking for with weed.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at like trying to make weed like the safer, and by kind of like doing more studies and stuff like that on it, like, and kind of figuring out what the pros and cons and stuff like that are. I'm all for that, but it's sort of like, so right now, because dealers kind of like have to kind of make it so quickly, like they're putting a lot of like chemicals and they're putting a lot of additives into it to kind of get like more quicker so they can make more money, and it's sort of like, if you take into account like all of the countries that don't have it legalized, that it is operating that way, and all of the states in the US who don't have it legalized, who are also operating it that way, like the amount of people that have smoked this stuff and they don't have like nearly the kind of negative side effects as you would kind of think that they would have, it sort of almost kind of makes it an argument of, if we make it safer than like virtually no side effects, I mean, like there's kind of, you kind of get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I would say that there could be side effects we wouldn't realize. So, for example, negative mental health, they have actually done, there are some limited studies that you can do that are controlled with marijuana if you are able to go through like a ton of loopholes. This one study did, and they actually did find association between, or actually a causation for negative emotional, it says, marijuana abusers show lower scores on positive emotionality and higher scores on negative emotionality than controls, consistent, on the other hand, with lower reward sensitivity. This is a study that I can link if you would like me to. It's from, but my concern is like, for a very, very, very long time, we couldn't necessarily pin that down. And just because we wouldn't know, like, okay, from observation, are just more people who are mentally ill doing weed, or is weed making people more mentally ill, right? So like, it's hard. Like, I feel like with alcohol, you brought up like the liver issue, and yes, that's like very clear. It's a very direct issue. I don't see that being the case with weed, but I don't know if that necessarily means that weed is less harmful just because the effects of it aren't as direct.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying about like weed making you more depressed and stuff like that, like, and it kind of causes this like cycle, because obviously after you smoke weed and you get stoned, you don't feel depressed, you feel happy as whatever, so it kind of develops a dependency and therefore somewhat of an addiction. So I get that it's kind of cyclical in that way, but I mean, like, it's just like it's less than 10% of people who smoke weed, as you would kind of said at the start, who get addicted. So like, it's not that I'm dismissing it, it's just that it is just such a very, very small number. And when you kind of look at the other substances that people can get addicted to, who are so obviously like worse for you, I just don't feel like, I kind of just think that like, if it's any substance, kind of no matter what the substance is, or like what the coping mechanism is, like you can become dependent and therefore addicted in a sense to it. I just don't think that for right now, that's kind of like a good enough reason to make it illegal.
Well, so I wouldn't say we should make it illegal. I think we should decriminalize it. Since it's already illegal, I think we need to take a step into the direction of, let's consider this for medical use and therefore do research on it. I also want to clarify, I do think there are some instances potentially medically where we could be used. Like, obviously, if you're dealing with like a cancer patient, I'm less concerned about mental decline than I am about their pain, right? Especially their terminal. So like, obviously I would say, hey, I think that's a fair medical use. And that's like right off the bat. I don't understand why we would categorize it as a Schedule I drug. I think that's insane. My concern though, and I think your logic there would fully apply, where it's like, it doesn't really matter if there are like long-term negative consequences when someone literally has cancer and is in pain, et cetera, et cetera. I am just concerned because, like, for the broader population, weed is the second most abused drug in America. Like, a lot of abuse it. It is very much of a myth that rarely anyone abuses it. Many people do, and they do not realize it. They're in denial, which I understand, because they're not seeing those negative effects. And typically people will say, oh, you have to have like all these like physical symptoms if you're abusing something. That's like also a misconception, but they are addicted, and we don't know what effects are happening, just because no one has researched it to the extent. And there's also a ton of misinformation that's spread. So I would say that it's ethical I would say it's more ethical to give someone cigarettes and say, hey, this is like really bad for you, but you have the option of doing it, than giving someone weed and saying like, hey, we don't know if this is really bad for you. It could be really bad for you down the road, 10, 20 years. We don't 100% know, but I'm going to give this to you and you can choose.
Yeah, and like I understand what you're saying, and I don't know who you've kind of talked to that people said that like you can't abuse weed because I mean like they're just stupid because yes, of course you can abuse it the same as you can abuse anything. My only kind of like main concern is, I mean, like where is the what's the criteria for like abusing something? It's the only reason that I ask is because I mean, the US will define if you have like more than like 2 drinks of alcohol with dinner, then you're like classified as an alcoholic. If you have that here, you're the designated driver. So I'm not really kind of sure on where the kind of metric is, you know?
Yeah, no, I understand. So I believe it goes into the DSM-5 cannabis use disorder, and that's how it's defined. I'm reading it here. I believe it says according to the DSM-5, the criteria for cannabis use disorder is as follows: use of cannabis for at least a 1-year period with a presence of at least two of the following symptoms, accompanied by significant impairment of functioning and distress. Difficulty containing use of cannabis. The drug is used in larger amounts and over a longer period of time than intended. Repeat failed efforts to discontinue or reduce the amount of cannabis that is used in an inordinate amount of time in occupying, acquiring, using, or recovering from effects of cannabis. Craving or desires to use cannabis. This can include intrusive thoughts and images, dreams about cannabis, or olfactory perceptions of the smell of cannabis due to preoccupation. Continued use of cannabis despite adverse consequences from its use, such as criminal charges, ultimatums of abandonment from spouse/partner/friend, and poor productivity. Other important activities in life, such as school, work, hygiene, responsibility to family and friends, are superseded by a desire to use cannabis. Cannabis is used in contexts that are potentially dangerous, such as operating a motor vehicle. Use of cannabis continues despite awareness of physical or psychological problems. Tolerance of cannabis, as defined by progressively larger amounts of cannabis, are needed to obtain the psychoactive effect experienced when first commenced or noticeably reduced effect of use of the same amount of cannabis. Withdrawal, defined as the typical withdrawal symptom associated with cannabis or cannabis of a similar substance, is used to prevent withdrawal symptoms. So that's like the whole thing. I know that took a little longer to read out.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a little bit longer than I had first anticipated, but I mean, like that, and I feel personally attacked, but okay.
Get scalloping.
Yeah, I don't know, like it's, I don't like, not all of them, obviously, Jesus Christ, I'd be like, that'd be a massive problem. But yeah, no, there was definitely like, I don't know, I just still, I understand that there are negatives to doing it, but I mean, if the criteria is that the negatives to doing something outweigh the positives of doing something, then I think that we should be kind of joined shoulder to shoulder in trying to get alcohol and cigarettes outlawed, rather than keeping weed illegal, or you know, like not making it like fully legal, like whatever the kind of metric is. Like, I just think that the fight is not placed in the right direction. I just think that the like consequences of smoking weed, of potentially getting addicted, et cetera, et cetera. It's lesser than all of the other things that have much worse side effects, much worse long-term effects. Yeah, I just don't see this as much of as big of a problem when you kind of compare it to exactly some other substances that people can use and abuse.
Right. So I would agree with what you said earlier about freedom, and I think that's really important. I'm not saying that we should like make it illegal because of the how bad it is. I think we need to give the individual enough information for them to decide on their own and weigh the benefits compared to the detriments for themselves. If they want to have like a chill time, a chill night, and they're like, hey, I know I'm not going to abuse this. I know this is a risk, so I'm going to avoid this at all costs. I think that's fair. I think that should be allowed. But we're not there now. We're not able to give all of those negatives so someone can make an informed decision. That's where I'm concerned. I'm also concerned because I feel like this same DSM-5 criteria, that is what is used for these studies. I feel like a lot of these people have, a lot of people who smoke weed don't know they're addicted. They are addicted and they don't know that they're at an increased risk of the negative effects that are even higher related to addiction of weed, such as cognitive decline or mental health issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of point out, just in case, I mean, like anybody was even remotely confused. I'm not in favor of banning smoking, and I mean, hey, I'm Irish. I'm definitely not in fan of banning drinking, but like. I just think that like if you have informed, enthusiastic consent, so that's what we ask for when people are buying stuff like drink and stuff like cigarettes. We put those like little like the gross picture of a lung on the packet of cigarettes, so you know that this might happen or whatever, right? But if you are informed of that, if you are informed of all of the side effects and you are still enthusiastically going into a shop or going into a drugstore, liquor store, whatever, and picking up this substance that you know might have adverse effects, I think, and you are still consenting to doing that, I think that like, even if, you know, the worst possible scenario, we did all these tests on weed, like after the kind of the lab restrictions were kind of removed. Even if we found out that there was all of these like massively like unheard of side effects, and it was, I don't know, it gave you tumors or something, right? I still think that if that was known and if people are still enthusiastic about consenting to it, even knowing that that's the risk, I mean, I still think that even if it was kind of proven to be like bad beyond belief, I still think if you haven't informed enthusiastic consent, you can't really stop people.
I completely agree. I think it should be legal. At that point, I would say it should be legal. I think my concern isn't with the negative consequences of like legalizing the drug like across the board. My concern is more legalizing it when we don't know enough information about it and we cannot give that informed consent. I don't like the government being involved in like what I can and cannot put in my body. I think that's not okay most of the time. But I also see the benefit of saying, hey, like if we want to give you that freedom, we're going to give you that freedom, but we want to be able to inform you so that you are able to make the best decision for you. And that's where I am hoping for. I would say if we were able to get a Schedule II drug and test it for a good amount of time and we got, good information on it, I would say that we should 100% legalize it at that point. I just do not think that's where we are.
I mean, okay, I just kind of want to just kind of pick up on something that like was your kind of overall point, I guess. If you're in favor of it being legal, if we find out that, it gives you brain tumors, this was my example. Mm-hmm. If you're in favor of making it legal then why can't we just make it legal right now? Say, look, we don't know what the long-term side effects are. You know what I mean? Give like that potential warning. Say like we're still kind of looking into this stuff, so we're not really sure. So, user discretion is advised or whatever. I mean, like, why can't we just do that, because if people like know that there's a possibility that there might be some long-term effects, you're still kind of giving that informed, enthusiastic consent if you know there's a possibility of some side effects and yet you still want to do it. That's what I come back to.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I think that would be, in my opinion, less than ideal, because I do like to give specifics rather than just like a vague, there could be issues with this. And also there could be things that we don't know what we would be expecting at that point. So like we already know we know for sure that it causes cognitive decline, heavy use does. We also know for sure that it causes mental issues. We're not like fully 100% sure about some stuff with like psychosis. It looks like it can cause that too. What the risk is there is like a little iffy, but we don't know other potential effects. And I think that's key. I feel like people should have for example, if you are working in a situation where everything's like super boring, if you just want to be at like one location working for the rest of your life and you don't want to, like, it's not important for you that you are like on top of your game cognitively, then yeah, you're probably not going to care. But if someone's wants to go to Harvard, but they still want to have fun with their friends, that specific thing that can cause lowering, cognitive decline is going to be significant for them. And I think just a blanket statement of this could cause issues isn't specific enough for individuals to make that decision.
Yeah, okay. So I can see where you're coming from. And look, would I be happier kind of knowing, okay, well, if I, you know what I mean, like the next joint that I smoke is going to get me one step closer to whatever it ends up being. Would I like to know what that specific is? Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's sort of in the same as, I mean, I've been vaping throughout this debate. Like these are what, like 5-10 maximum years, or they're like around for, like, we don't know what the long-term effects of this are. I mean, it's probably worse because it's just water vapor, so there's still water going into my lungs, you know, and like it's still, so like, I don't know, it's just kind of like, I think we have a lot of these things in kind of effect already. Like we don't know what the long-term effects of this is, and yet nobody is talking about banning it. Yes, we might not know about what the long-term negative effects of smoking weed is, but yeah, a lot of places have banned it. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. Like I just, my main kind of crux of why I'm so in favor of it is because if you have informed, enthusiastic consent, I don't see what possible reason anybody could have to be like, well, no, you still can't do it. It's like,
no, I agree with you.
If somebody told you that they wanted to jump off of their, roof, and you're like, yeah, dude, like you can do that, but you're going to break your legs. They'll be like, yeah, no, I know I'm going to break my legs, but I still want to do it. Like, yeah, you can try and talk them out of it, but I mean, if they really want to do it, then they're going to do it anyway. So it's kind of, like, and then when you look at, I mean, there's like how many tens of thousands of prisoners in your country who are there for non-violent drug offenses? The vast majority of them having to do with weed. Like they were literally non-violent, and yet they're in there for like 10 years. Like that's stupid,
I agree with you.
And like then if you have, somebody who is even underage, and like I'm not in favor of anybody say like under the age of 18 smoking it, because like the younger that you smoke it, the more kind of cognitive decline. I think that like there's early studies kind of showing that. So I'm not in favor of that. But I mean, even if there was like a 16-year-old kid who was like smoking a joint and a police officer, like finds him or whatever, and like, if that police officer wants to book him for that and potentially ruin like his career aspirations, if he wants to travel, if he wants to join the military, if he wants to join the police force, if he wants to do any of these things, they're now done. What? Because he wanted to get a little high after he was finished with his homework. It's like, it's just all of those stuff that I just kind of like, no.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's where I would be in favor of decriminalization, because that would fix that situation. It would make it so that you're not going to go to jail. It would be a misdemeanor, essentially. Yeah. So it's same as like a parking, the traffic ticket or something. It goes off of it's not like a huge deal. It's not anything like that. Also, anyone who would be in jail from it would be released, which I think would be very important. I think for any drug usage offense that is important. I still believe, so I agree with you. I think you brought up Portugal at the beginning, and that's what they did, is they didn't fully legalize. They haven't legalized weed. It's only decriminalized along with all of their other drugs. They decriminalized it. They still are focusing on because I know that they've gotten a lot better, but they're still focusing on trying to make their situation better before legalizing anything, which is like, it's their country. But they found like it really worked really well, and made it so that people could actually go and get help without being concerned that they were going to get turned in, while still maintaining the distribution or the production of the substance as being illegal, which I feel like that's fair. I think you said one other thing earlier that I wanted to touch on. I think one difference between, and I might be a little wrong on this because I haven't like vaped. I'm not in the vape culture, so I might be wrong. I used to smoke a lot. I used to smoke weed a lot, but I never really heard any arguments. There wasn't much misinformation about vapes. I feel like I think the most that you get about vapes is that, yeah, you still have nicotine in it. It's still like bad for you on that front, but you don't have like the smoke going into your lungs or maybe some of the other additives. From my understanding, that's usually correct.
Yeah.
But like, there's not that level of misinformation that there is around weed, in my opinion. With weed, a lot of what I hear is that it's only psychologically addictive. It's not physically addictive, which is just wrong. Also, people will say that that like it's not that bad for your lungs, where it is. There's just so many things, or that you can't get addicted to it. That's my concern, is that people think that you can't get addicted to it and they keep on doing it. Or it's hard to get addicted to it, and it's not incredibly hard. So that's where I feel like the enthusiastic consent is important, especially when you have a substance where there is so much misinformation surrounding it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that people can get addicted to it, and I know that there's at least one person in the live chat who's going to say that I am, but I don't personally view myself as addicted to weed. Like, I could stop smoking weed tomorrow. Like, I'm probably not going to, but I know that I could if I had to. Like, if it came down to, paying my rent or paying for weed, I mean, I'm paying my rent. Like, it's a no-brainer. It's an obvious, it's like not even a discussion. So it's just like, I don't know, like, but I mean, kind of in the same sense as like when, you have someone who's like 16, 17, 18, like who's just starting to drink for the first time. That might be slightly older because the States is 21. But anyway, if you have someone who's just starting to drink, like, you can still say to them, hey, dude, like, you can get addicted to drinking. Like, you can become dependent on it. I know I keep kind of coming back to it, but it like, as I said, like, the main kind of crux of why I'm so in favor of it is because of informed enthusiastic consent. If you say that you know that you might get addicted to it and yet you still want to do it, if that turns into a problem later, yeah, absolutely. And we can like work on that problem. Now, I do think that the rehab system needs to be vastly improved, but like, just to kind of mention, I'm pretty sure it's the same for NA as well. But with AA, they don't count you if you if you administer, if you go into AA again, they count you as someone new. They don't count you as like having failed and gone back. So I think that those kind of systems need to be improved and stuff. But like, by and large, I'm just still kind of like, if you want to smoke it, you smoke it, just do it responsibly. And I don't want to see like young people smoking it, but yeah.
So that's where I feel like the decriminalization would help, where obviously if you want it, then you get it. Like, again, and if you're going to jump off a building, then you're going to jump off a building. Like, you can take steps to resolve that. But I feel like the decriminalization is kind of like, hey, if this is something that you really want, we're not going to try to penalize you for it. I kind of view it, the fact that it's illegal, is more of a preventative measure. Like, I'm not sure if you heard of like econometrics. It's like the statistical putting statistics within econ and figuring out how people make decisions based on their environment and the probability of them making a certain decision. I feel like with something still being illegal, with something still being kind of like, yeah, you probably don't want to do this, I think that within itself discourages it, which is important. And I think as long as you don't have like a permanent record, I don't see it as being a huge deal to discourage it. I think it's important to discourage it as long as you are doing what you can, or giving the researchers the ability to actually figure out exactly the negatives. I also wanted to kind of, I know you brought up if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. I wonder if this is different in Ireland, but like a situation that we just ran into, because Hunter, my husband, used to be really addicted to weed. And he's like coming out of it currently. But what I found very interesting was his doctor, his primary care physician, he actually encouraged him to continue using it. When Hunter came, he's like, I feel like I'm using this too much. I'm a little worried about it. But I'm using it for my anxiety. I'm using it for mental health issues. The doctor was like, no, any medication, you're going to have some effects and stuff. So just keep on going. It's fine. And to me, that's like, when you have like doctors that are giving misinformation, I feel like that's like a whole new level of misinformation. When in reality, there's no proof at all that it improves mental health. It can maybe like a couple hours after you take it, but like overall, long term, it goes down. Your mental health goes down. And on top of that, like he was saying that he was exhibiting signs of abuse, and the doctor was like kind of chill with it. I don't know. I feel like it's a different level where you're having so much misinformation. It's just insane. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of... Okay, so I know that even though we don't know too much about weed, like we do know enough to kind of say some things for certain about it. But I would just kind of wonder where like your criteria, I guess, I don't think that's the right word, but it's the only one that's coming to mind at the minute, of where you kind of say that we haven't done the studies like long term into like the effects of weed, but we know that such and such is misinformation. I'm kind of, I get where you're coming from with certain things, like if like some doctor for whatever reason was to say that, yeah, like it helps your, I don't know, it helps your breathing ability or whatever. Yeah, he's just flat out wrong. Like we know that some things are, but it's just kind of, where is the line, I guess?
So I would say is that like you would have to look at the studies, right? And the only studies that can really tell you causal situations are controlled. The rest are observational and the rest are correlational. And I think that's like very vital. There are not a ton of causational studies surrounding weed. There are some where the people who have done the studies were able to get around kind of like the federal restrictions by, I don't know, there's loopholes. But many people, I don't think they're exploited very frequently, from what it seems. But there is a study that I am looking at here from PNAS, and it says, it's titled "Decreased Dopamine Brain Activity in Marijuana Abusers is Associated with Negative Emotionality and Addiction Severity." And what this did is it had a control group, and they were able to isolate factors. And they found that the people who used weed more heavily had a much worse like mental health, I guess, situation. And on top of that, they found that weed actually made it so that stimulants or other medication for stuff like ADHD, because of weed abuse, those stimulants wouldn't work nearly as well, and they don't even know how long that's the case. So they found that's like a side thing that they found within the study. So I would say that like there are some things that we have been able to establish and that are just commonly accepted. There's this one article from NCBI, which is like pretty standard, and it kind of like goes through like cannabis and psychosis, and it's like, okay, well, this is established, this isn't established. But so we have established a few things. We have been able to establish a few things. My issue is that like we haven't done enough research to figure out situations like, oh, will this affect something like ADHD medication if this person has ADHD stimulant, you know, whatever, or like what is the severity of psychosis, or like a lot of like even more detailed situations. It's hard to really flesh out given the scheduling of the drug. Then that's like what they've said. That's what the experts have even said. They just can't give adequate safety and efficacy studies. They can't get the results for them, enough of them. I feel like I'm not making sense. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I don't know. I would just kind of say, like, how can you kind of, so if I was to say that, you know, weed gives you tumors, right? I said it earlier. It's just in my head. If I was to say that, right, and we like did studies and stuff like that, technically speaking, that would be misinfo, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, how do we know if I say that weed causes brain tumors is misinfo unless we do the studies on it? And because we haven't, I'm just kind of wondering, like, how you can be like so sure, I guess, that like these really negative side effects like are there. It's just because we don't know. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that like it's almost like you can't know that you're right. You know what I mean?
So right. So I would say that, like, for example, with the doctor specifically saying that it can improve anxiety, it's just there's no proof of that, and that's very largely accepted within the medical community. There's no proof that, or like at least it's kind of up in the air. For like depression and stuff, it like has been proven to make it worse. So that is already established. That part is established that it's proven to make it worse. Hunter also like had depression, so it's like the fact he had depression and he was still saying to use weed and continue it when he was addicted was concerning. So it's just like, I don't know, it's just a little odd. So I would say that like there are individual studies that can prove things. And there's consensus on many of these issues, like the psychosis situation, there's like consensus on. But I just would say that like not everything we don't know for sure, for definitely. And they want to do more research because they know they cannot give adequate warnings or understand the safety risks fully.
Yeah, I would just kind of say this is to kind of circle back to something that I said in, I think, my opening. I don't think I've mentioned it since then. But I mean, I would just kind of say that, like, okay, so if we were to find out that, like, right now, like, if we were to you know, study the groups of people who are smoking weed regularly, like now as it currently exists in a state where it's not yet legal, I don't know how accurate that data could be because people are putting like chemicals and additives into it. I think that if you regulate it, if you make it, you know, like past like a certain amount of standards, like, I don't know, like a food safety check, like that level of like strictness, if that was to go into it, to make sure that the weed is like pure and that there's that there's nothing added to it, that it is 100% safe.
Yeah.
I think that you would need to kind of do that first before kind of doing the studies to kind of test about what the long-term effects are, because if you were to do the tests now and then make it clean later, I don't know how reliable the data would be at that point, because it would be including those chemicals and those additives.
No, I think that's fair. I would say that from what I remember, it was medical marijuana, so that has standards.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my understanding. I can try to find it here. I'm looking at the study here, but yeah, I believe it was medical marijuana. I would be very surprised if an academic study decided to use street weed. I don't know. I feel like that would be a little sus. Just because I feel like a lot of these studies are trying to be very like pinpointing what are we trying to study and like controlling for that exactly. I don't know.
A good time to go into the Q&A unless any of you have closing thoughts from what you've discussed so far.
No, I mean, like my one and only kind of closing is just that, like, yeah, just if informed, enthusiastic consent is there, you do you. That's it. That's yep.
I would say I completely agree with that. I would say that people need to be better informed. When the researchers are saying that they don't have enough information to give people for them to be informed, I think that's something that we need to consider. And I feel like it is ridiculous that people are like behind bars for any type of drug use. It's absolutely terrible. And I think that needs to stop. And it needs to be decriminalized for that specific reason. But that's pretty much all I have.
You got it. We'll jump.
Go ahead. Sorry.
We'll jump into the Q&A, and want to say thanks for your questions, folks. We're going to try to move through these fast so we can get through as many as possible, as well as both of our guests are linked in the description in case you want to hear more. And let me unscramble those pictures just a second. Let's see. So in case the pictures on screen are swapped, that's just because sometimes if a guest turns off their camera, that does that. But we do want to say, no worries, not a big deal. Mr. Monster, thanks for your question. Says, I have ulcerative colitis and my doctor recommended marijuana to help reduce inflammation in my colon. Why should marijuana be illegal if it helps?
I don't think so. I'm not saying that it never helps. And I think that it could potentially help. And I'd like to know exactly how it helps. And I'd like people to be able to figure out with their doctors if those risks are something that they would like to or is worth taking for the benefits that it provides.
You got it. And this question coming in from, do appreciate it. And then Cider, I want to ask you, I know this is picky, but just because we have a small percent out there, 1% are like audio nerds and pretentious bastards about the audio. If you could do me a favor, is that 1% will come down on me in the comments. If you're able to mute when you're taking a puff, it helps a little bit. This one coming in from Raymond CGTC says, we need to legalize it and let adults decide. Carissa.
I think ultimately, I think you're right. And I don't think people can decide unless they're well informed.
You got it. Mango T says, Cider, I had marijuana and have not been the same since. It is an evil drug and destroyed my life. I had a psychosis and viewed others as artificial intelligence beings.
Oh, no.
I mean, that to me sounds like it did something other than just weed. But I mean, yeah, look, like I can't like necessarily discount your personal experience if that's what happened to you. You know, I'm very sorry. That's obviously not what's ever happened to me or to anyone else that I know. I know that that's not necessarily the best of arguments, but I mean, I don't know if there's any studies on it, so I don't really know what else to reference. Yeah, no, sorry that happened, but yeah, I think that that's the exception to the rule.
You got it.
If I can just jump in really, really quick. I'm sorry, I know this is a little off topic. I just wanted to get this in because I thought it was hilarious. When you were saying that weed made you feel like everything was a simulation. I had the exact same thing happen to me, and I still believe we're in a simulation. So maybe it is
I
actually
kind of unironically think we do as well.
Juicy. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question. Gualame Paradis says, why should pot be illegal when cigarettes are legal and contain much more toxic components and can also lead to addiction? Carissa.
because we know the effects of cigarettes, and there are warnings around cigarettes, and there's no misinformation about cigarettes. So once we get to that point with weed, I think it should be legal. If we know everything about weed that is important to know, and we are able to warn people regarding that, I think it should also be legal.
You got it. And Mango T, thanks for your super chat question, says, I had marijuana and it's resulted in noticeable cognitive decline. I experienced a period of retardation and continue to do so. I think they're being sincere and that it's not a troll, just for the record. No, they're a troll for sure. Let's see. Stupid Horror Energy says, which weed dispensaries were forced to stay open during the pandemic? In parentheses, unlike liquor stores. Avalone.
Were they? Most of them did stay open, I believe.
They were
Medical
asking
marijuana.
which ones were forced to stay open.
I have no idea.
Ozzy and Tox, thanks for your question, says, sex is legal even with possible negative outcomes. Would you advocate for decriminalizing sex instead of making it legal? Why should pot be illegal just due to potential misuse and bad outcomes?
I believe that everyone knows, or if they had sex education, so maybe not all homeschoolers, because I was a homeschooler. Everyone knows or should know the potential issues with sex, and they shouldn't have sex without knowing that.
You got it. And thank you very much for your question. This one coming in from Ryan says, recent studies show 22% of adult Americans regularly use marijuana. How can you say we don't know the effects, long and short term? Avalone.
So the issue there is because we have to isolate certain variables. So like, for example, for a very long time, we couldn't tell whether or not weed affected mental health because we didn't know if people who smoked weed were more likely to have mental health issues prior to smoking weed, and that's why they were smoking weed, or if weed actually caused those mental health issues. Even if they were substantial, it would be very difficult to figure that out. Just because a lot of people are doing it, and just because we can even collect data on those people, does not allow us to control for one specific factor and prove a causal relationship.
You got it, Anne. Thank you very much for this question. Ghost says, can I get an oh yeah? Oh yeah. And Ghost says, high pitched, by the way. I don't know. Are you saying from me or from the guests? I just want to know before I give you my my high-pitched oh yeah. Ghost says also, have cider give a quick dab.
Shit. How much was the super chat for?
What was it? That one was a $50 super chat.
Are they talking about
joking. It really
I
was.
don't know.
What
I
is
mean,
a
I have to
dab?
now, like.
Help
Take a
inform
toke.
me. Oh,
Take a
I
toke.
see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I have to now.
Mac the Human says, legalize spinning around until you're dizzy. I think they mean make it illegal, and I think it's a parody argument, Carissa. I'm guessing. Did I get that right, Mac? Let me know. Carissa laughs at your question. Okay, next one coming up.
Sure.
This one coming up from If There's Someone. Actually, Screwy Scatagera has the next one, says for Carissa. What does she mean? There are many people that don't know why. Forgive me. What does she mean that there are many people that don't know they're addicted? Does she mean we can't tell we're ruining our lives, even if we've lived well for years?
I think some people can, 100%. I think it's very, very possible to tell that you're addicted. And I think there's a stark distinction between that and saying that some people know that they're addicted, but a lot don't. Of course, it's possible to know you're addicted, and that's wonderful you do. But many people do not know that they're addicted just because they don't have some of the more blatant effects from addiction that you would see with other types of drugs.
You got it. And Oliver Catwell, thanks for your channel membership support. We really do appreciate it. Just sent in a question. Says, if legalization over decriminalization allows enforcing an age limit as well as tax revenue dedicated to rehab/education, is that worth it?
I think for the future, for sure. I love the fact that I believe they do something to that extent with cigarettes. They have like taxes on them. And I think that should 100% be done with weed. Age limits, I don't know. I don't know about age limits in general if someone's an adult, but I mean, it's something to consider, I guess.
You got it. This one coming in from Ghost, a follow-up, says he hasn't dabbed.
Are they meaning like that? Like
that thing?
You guys have to teach me. I don't know what these things mean.
I don't know. I don't know of any other. What other dab?
Like with a Q-tip? What is this?
I am.
Q-tip.
I have no idea.
Is this
no idea.
slang? Like those innuendos?
I'm getting help as well. I don't know.
People in the chat, they talk about Cleveland steamers and taking grandma to Applebee's and all these innuendos. I don't know. But that is it. As far as questions, I think I've gotten all of them. Let me know, folks, if I did miss any. I do want to just give a couple of quick notes before anybody puts in any last questions. One, our guests are linked in the description. That includes at the podcast. I didn't mention that before. We do have a podcast. We upload every single debate within about 24 hours to the podcast, so you can listen to it right away. You can save on your data. Just download it to your phone. Convenient. And we put our guest links there. Carissa and Cider Import will be linked in the description there. Next, if there's someone that you think, folks, might be persuaded by this debate such that they may have a more open mind, they may kind of see the light more, they may kind of get a more well-rounded opinion on this topic that you've talked to before, consider sharing this debate with them. Click that share button and it can give you a link that you can share with them on Facebook, Twitter, text messaging, and you can say, hey, this is a good debate on this topic. I know we've talked about it before. I thought you might get a kick out of hearing both sides on this. Highly recommend it. And then let me check the chat for any final questions that have come in. Let's see.
I've just been reading the live chat there. The dab is like when you get like a lot of weed and you basically like get like what is essentially like a concrete press and you just compact it so much that like this wax falls out and it's like 75% THC or something like that, like something ridiculous like that. If you like smoke a tiny bit of that, you are ridiculously high. We don't have weed legal here anywhere. So like kind of getting like that much weed in like is just not like, it just doesn't happen. There's just not enough of it coming in for people to be able to like make wax out of it. So no, it's not really a thing here. I haven't tried it. I'd like to. But,
I tried it one time. How the tables turn. But yeah, I tried it once, but
how the tables turn indeed. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. What were you saying?
No, it was, I tried it one time and I thought I got offended by the fact that my neighbor's house was faced the other direction because I thought they didn't like me.
That's quite base and red pill, Carissa. And this one coming in last minute from Mateo Trujillo says a single drug conviction bars you from applying for financial aid for 1 year. Second offense is 2 years, and the third, you're permanently barred from applying for federal financial aid. I think they're saying, this is my guess, Carissa, like, come on, like, this is kind of brutal on people. Are you sure?
I completely agree. That would be fixed with decriminalization. Decriminalize it. Don't make it legal, but decriminalize it.
Ah, I see. And Oliver Catwell says, Cider Import and Carissa, thank you all for the great debate. And hey, all credit to our speakers. They are the lifeblood of the channel. This one coming in from Smoke Lots of Weed 420. Wonder whose side they're on. Says, how can one actually justify putting others in jail for smoking marijuana?
It's Jeff Sessions.
Next up, that's, I think, it for our questions. Oh, Brooke Sparrow says the link for Carissa is not working. Thanks for letting me know about that, Brooke. I'll fix that right now. And yes, our guests are linked in the description. I'm fixing Carissa's right now, and that way you guys got the real deal, and that'll be in the podcast as well. But yes, we are thankful for our guests. Want to say a huge thank you to Carissa and to Cider and Port. It has been a true pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you both very much.
Thank you very much for having me, James.
100%.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, folks, it's late for our dearest friends. Well, last question just came in. Mateo Trujillo says, no, that is for misdemeanor level offenses, Carissa. They were the one that had asked about in terms of, financial aid being taken away for 1 year if you have a drug conviction. They said, no, that is for misdemeanor level offenses. So decriminalization wouldn't work.
Hopefully, then that could be changed. I don't know. It just seems, generally speaking, I feel like even in our current system, it's bad. So that should be changed too. I don't know.
Juicy. And so what we're going to do is I will be right back, you guys. And I want to say thank you to our guests once again, though. We really do appreciate them. One is because they jumped in last minute, which we appreciate so much because we want to put, for sure, at least one debate on this week. Because as you know, folks, sad. We had somebody that didn't make it. He slept in during the debate yesterday, but we're rescheduling that. So we're extra thankful, not only for a quality debate, but also on a week in which it was one where I'm like just especially thankful, Carissa and Cider and Port. And also, I got to tell you, folks, Cider and Port is in Ireland. He is. What time is it there right now, Cider and Port? You're staying up with us till?
It's a little after 3 a.m.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being willing to stay up that late debating. We want to let our guests go. But thank you guys for real. I really do appreciate it. We all do.
Thanks so much, James.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll be right back, folks. So stick around for this post-credit scene. I'm going to do all sorts of weird stuff like juggle and take my clothes off. I'll be right back.